the hymn number 65. Écoutez le chant joyeux. Chapter 5 from 2 to 5. For yourself know perfectly the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all the children of light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night or not darkness. Therefore let us not sleep, as do others, but let us watch and be sober. Let's pray. Please kneel down. Our gracious, kindly, ever-loving Father, we come to your eternal throne and we plead like Joshua the high priest. Father, you know how much of filthy garments our members and our church has. You know if you don't heal us from these filthiness, we will all perish. But we plead with you to give us the perfect cloth of righteousness. Clothe each one who is participating, especially in the Quebec province, to bring this message to the whole world. Father, you have chosen us not by some kind of a fluke or some kind of a choice, but you have chosen us. In your great mercy, you have called us to the Lord's Supper, and that we may participate with you eternally in your kingdom. Father, I pray that you will grant us thy Holy Spirit especially the topic that we are studying today is about the Holy Spirit. Be with us to understand and clearly be with you to serve you eternally. We ask all these things in thy Son Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
So the topic is called the spirit of prophecy. We did that part 1, so we are going to go to part 2. So part 2, what we will discuss in part 2 is, we studied the spirit of prophecy in the ancient time. Today we are going to see in the early church, in the middle church, and the last church. The 3 divisions that we are going to investigate. Now, Paul writes something very interesting. He says that like a thief in the night, they will be all taken out. How does a thief come? He tells a telegram and he puts it in the TV and he announces to everybody, I'm coming today, so be watchful. No. He comes suddenly and you are sleeping and he takes your life, take all your things and he goes. And that is how the destruction for God's people and for people who don't know the truth even. The same thing applies. Because if you see in Ezekiel chapter 9, that talks about the destruction, especially he talks about in the church of God. He says he sent a man and he had an impulse con, and that is to put the name of the Father and write us that we are the property of God. And once he does that, then the command is given from the Father's throne, go and slay everybody. We are talking about in the church of God. And it says, with the ancient of men it started. Who are the ancient of men? The leaders, the fathers of the church. So there will be a slaughter. Sister White writes in her Spirit of Prophecy too, but people, if they are willing to believe, then they will be prepared. But that's slaughter. But it's interesting enough, Ezekiel, when he saw this vision, what did he do? He was so happy and he was jumping for joy. No. He fell down and he was moaning to God and said, God, don't do this. But then God said, do you see the hypocrisy and the wickedness of these people who claims to be God's people and trying to do wickedness? I can't stand that, he said. Take them away. So there is a time coming. So we are studying, because this is what talks, Paul writes about thief in the night. A thief doesn't come and tell you. Now, if we go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, I'll go to the last part, because why the spirit of prophecy is important is, it says in 19 to 21, he says, quench not the spirit. What is quenching? Okay, it's like a fire. You are, burning with the zeal of God and the love of God, and, you're going forward. But he says, don't quench that. That's how the early church started. With the quench of this, with the blaze of fire of the Spirit of God, and with the love of the message, they all ran to preach the gospel. And Thomas, the famous Thomas, who was asking Jesus, I want to put my hand inside you, he went to India and he went to Sister Kodai's country, and there he was killed by the natives. But he didn't worry about that. He brought the message, because still his message is standing. And like that, all the 12 apostles, 11 apostles, they went and they brought the message. And that is the early church's mission, was to bring them. So it says here, quench not the spirit, despise not prophesying. So he's saying, don't despise, love it. The prophecy comes, love that, because that gives you direction. And he said, prove all things, and that which is good. And then he says, abstain from all appearance of evil. Now, he's saying that to exercise. What is an exercise for you? When a man doesn't lose his, because I know for me, if I won't do exercise, I wake up early morning, I have to move my legs. I have to fight with me because it's really painful, the body, because of my disease, arthritis, it took me. But still, I have to work against my will to really to push myself. So same thing like he's saying, exercise the spirit of prophecy. The spirit of prophecy is important because we know the direction. Today we are going to study the second part of the spirit of prophecy. So first, the last church which will be waiting when before Jesus comes, it's pictured in Revelation chapter 12 and 17. Something is written concerning this church and the dragon. And you know who is this dragon? It's not, we are talking about these Chinese dragons, or they have these dances of Chinese dragons. But we are talking about Lucifer, was wroth with the woman. Who is this woman? The church that God is prophesied in Revelation chapter 18, because the battle is all this time is not direct. Now it comes to the climax of battles of the battles. And you see Revelation 13, all power is given to papacy. And then you see the church of God also given all power. That is in Revelation 18, because it's interesting what's written, the words of God. The all power is given to the church of God because of Jesus Christ. And the all power from dragon is given to who? To the wicked one. So let's see, then it says, wrath with the woman, that is the church of God, because Satan loves the Catholic Church and he loves all the false churches because they are all his friends. And went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep what? The commandments of God. You know, commandments of God distinguish God's people from false people. This is why we are here on the Sabbath day, because it's also part of the commandment of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. What is the testimony of Jesus Christ? It's interesting if you really see what it means. You have to go to Revelation chapter 19, verse 10. It says, "And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, See thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus Christ." So now John the Revelator was seeing who? He was seeing Gabriel. Gabriel is so unique and magnificent. He feared him and he wanted to give him reverence. So what did he do? He started to fall and worship him. He pulled his hand and said, what did he say to him? Don't do that, he said. He said, that is against the commandment of God. Although I am with the Father's throne, but I still respect the commandments of God. This is what Satan did. He took what? Homage to himself. And that's why you see, if you go to Vatican, the Pope is sitting in the throne of God and everybody is falling and worshipping and he gives his ring and they kiss his ring, showing homage. But Jesus said, the angel said, don't do it. It's against the will of God. And then he says to him, the testimony of Jesus, worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So what do you understand? You see, Bible is like a puzzle chain. If you put this chain and that chain together, you understand the story behind. So what it's saying, the testimony of Jesus is what? The spirit of prophecy. So the spirit of prophecy is a very important thing for the church of God, because that is what distinguishes us from the world, because you have both. You will have the commandments of God inside God's church, and you will also have a spirit of prophecy to guide you towards the eternal goal. So let's see, now like I mentioned, we are going to investigate on the early church, the middle church, and the last church, the spirit of prophecy. I might take a little bit time. If you guys don't mind, I will finish this because today. So it's go, it's like in Matthew chapter 28:20, it says, "Lo, I am with you until the end of the earth." Jesus comes to us through his Holy Spirit to live with us until the end of the world, until the end of the ages, until he comes, he says. 2000 years have transpired, but still he is with us. And that is why he says, "Lo, I am with you." He doesn't lie to us. He doesn't leave us and run, but he is constantly walking with his people, exactly like he did in the time of Moses. Moses' time, they could really see his presence what? In the cloud, and fire by night and cloud by day. Today, the same message, the same continuance of it goes through him, but if you have what? If you have the faith of God, and if you believe in his words, and if you see Jesus leads our work. It is not a human-made message, or we are trying to bring people here and deceive people. No. It is what it is distinguishes God's people. The spirit of prophecy, as well as his direction and his guidance to his people. So it is, is it glorious? What do you prefer? You see Jesus Christ walking with you in the clouds and directing you, or you, with your invisible eye, you believe and see him directing you. Which one you prefer? I prefer the second one, because with our invisible eye we believe and we see him. Because Jesus said, "Blessed is he that who believes in me without seeing." Blessed. So there is a blessing because we do that. But to do that, we have to clearly understand every word that is spoken by the mouth of God, because we can be deceived too. And then he was talking also in Mark chapter 16, 17, 18, there will be signs following God's people. They will be taking, all kinds of serpent, scorpion, or even poison, they won't die. And the other thing is they will kill many things. This was the blessing of the early rain. When they received the early rain, there was power. So much power was granted to this church. So they did it. But because of the corruption and all these things penetrated inside the church and the apostasy, slowly, they also lost their glory. And the power of the Spirit of God, God doesn't work when you start to sin too much. To a time he cries behind his people. But if they don't listen, then he just leaves them and go. That is called the great apostasy. Now we will come to the Middle Ages, we will see on the 16th century Reformation, we have his book here, speaks about the prophecies of individuals. He just was speaking about John Huss. Maybe you didn't know him, about John Huss. John Huss was a 20-year-old. He was coming from a place called, that time it's part of Germany, but it was not Bohemia, capital of Bohemia. I will tell you about this place also. Huss means in reality goose in Bohemian language. Goose, the flies from winter to winter, the goose you would have seen many times. You can hear them when they are flying over your head. So he was called a goose. And then he also prophesied many things, but when he was 20 years old, what happened for him to change is his country, the lady who was related to his country, it was in 1394, Anne of Bohemia. She married King Richard II of England. And when King Richard II died, she returned to Prague and Bohemia. And what happened is, when she went, you know what she did? She took the doctrine of John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe was called the morning star of the Reformation. He was an Oxford professor and one of the most educated person that time you could find. I believe, this is what I believe, God uses everybody. Like you saw today, God was using Brother Jason here. But he's not an Oxford professor, but neither me. But what I'm saying is sometimes he uses everybody towards to bring the gospel message. But to do a strong work, a powerful reformation, he always chose the best. If you have seen in the time of ancient time, he chose Moses. Moses was the most biggest intellect that you could find on that time. He was educated in every literature, knowledge and architecture, everything that you could find in his time. He was a man of his time. Now then later on, if you would see many times, if you have seen, now we are talking about John Wycliffe, he was a very learned person. And then Martin Luther, he was also an intellect. So, but they all have to have somewhere to start. That is the inspiration work of God, touching them through the works of somebody. So we see that when the executioners brought him to the pyre, and he was the chief executioner was saying to him, "Oh, now let's cook the goose." Because they were supposed to fire up the thing and cook him, to burn him. And he said to them, "Listen, now you will cook the goose, but 100 years from now, there will come an eagle in 100 years that you will never not be able to reach." What he was talking about, he was telling them, you could easily kill me and go today, but wait and see, because this is the Catholic Church was doing this. There is coming a time that they are going to cook you, he's going to get you. Who was that? We will go a little bit. So these are all prophecies too. We know that the same moment when this decision was taken about John Huss, the committee which burnt John Huss, because he was influenced by this queen as well as from, you see, the highest intellects, the powerful people, they were involved in the mission of Jesus Christ. It's not just, somebody in the corner begging there, he's making these missions. They are powerful people. Now, when he was brought this message, the message of importance was, getting very popular. So they got very angry with who? John Wycliffe. So same time, I think around 60 years this happened, or 160 years. He was living in the 13th and now it's the 15th century. So what did they do? They went out and took his bones. He was an English guy, so in England they took his bones and they burned his bones. Have you seen a church which preaches tolerance and love and thing? A man after his death even, they don't allow them to live in peace. They go behind his bones. Okay, I have never seen a church like that, and I was part of this church. I discussed to say that they did that. Even the Hindus don't do that. Even the communists don't do that. Such a disgrace for me. And this is what triggered me and turned my head off to leave and run away from these guys. And they burnt him and they took his ashes and spread it in the Avon River. And they were saying they took him and just tried to get rid of him. But what they did was they made more powerful his message And it became like a wildfire, his message, throughout England and all over the place. We should be thankful for the kingdom of England. Because I think if God didn't sustain the great nation England, there won't be no message of salvation. All the people will be gays and lesbians, and there won't be no message of hope for no souls. They will be all lost. But still God knows what He's doing. So then when we go to Charles Beck, okay, and he was talking about George Whitehead. Did you hear about John Whitehead? He was living in the time. Okay, let me just talk a little bit about what the prophecy of John has. Martin Luther was born in 1483, like 100 years after John has, and Wycliffe didn't write this message like what is it. He was only protesting about transubstantiation. And you know what is transubstantiation? Transubstantiation is when you take the bread that we have in Lord's Supper, bread and wine, literally the bread and the wine become bread, become meat of Jesus Christ, and the blood becomes the blood of Christ. So it's like a carnivore thing they were talking about, that they insulted the throne and they insulted the grace of God. It really saddens when people start these kind of doctrines. That is why Wycliffe was protesting. Now, when we went to John Wycliffe and to Martin Luther, has put 6 errors of the churches. He was writing about 6 errors. First error, he was saying salvation comes through Jesus Christ, and He is the leader of the church, not the Pope. So right away there was a drift inside the church, and they started to take him out. That's why they burnt him, getting so much anger over him. Okay, they excommunicated him in 1412. But exactly like he said, Martin Luther was born, and he published a very interesting doctrine of 95 theses. He posted on the door. He founded only 6 errors. He founded 95 errors of the church. And one thing about Martin Luther, he also talked about our time. And the other thing, Martin Luther's King Charles, he was brought before King Charles V, the German king, for his belief in the doctrine, in the message about justification by faith and all things. But it was interesting what happened with the protector of him. You know who protected him? It was Prince Frederick, who was the right-hand man of King Charles V, Germany. Not only that, the Holy Roman Empire, when it was established, when the vacuum came for the king to be established in Germany, rather than choosing Charles V, the Pope wanted the Frederick to become the ruler, because he was very close connected with the papacy. And he was also a very devoted man. And he was also sustaining the church. And what made him to go like that and just support Martin Luther? Because few days before, he dreamt that in his place comes a smart priest, and he's posting something on the 95 Theses, and he could read that, what is written there. And interesting enough, after a few weeks, he saw that. And then he was called to Rome, and he was caught into such a big battle to fight. But it was all prophesied. This is why I'm saying, God doesn't just leave us like that. He gives directions. He gives this. Why these great people should support these people? Because it's God is behind these things. And invisibly he's working with these governments, and invisibly he's working with great people inside the nations. Sometimes people think, okay, God has abandoned us, he's just, no, he's not. Every moment he is in control. So these are the prophecies he was talking about, And he said to him in the dream, Almighty God sent me a monk who was a true son of the Apostle Paul. He even saw all the errors he wrote in his dream. So, like I said, it was then. And then I wanted to talk about Charles Beck. And Charles Beck was telling about George Whitshire. He was a Scottish reformer, and he was also martyred for his faithfulness. He started to preach in 1544. He traveled house to house in Scotland, and he was also facing the Great Death, which was happening, the Black Death, and he went and he started to help all those suffering there. He was a great monk, and his student was John Knox. And you know who started the Presbyterian Church? It was John Knox. And this church was built by the Presbyterians. So we have some kind of a connection with them. But they were great reformers. And he was burnt seized in 1566 by the Earl of Bushwell. And under the Cardinal Beaton, he was brought to trial, and it was a big show. Even Huss was like a big show. They dressed him up with, kind of a dress to mock him, and they gave him a crown of, a mockery, but they cannot escape these things, what they did. They will be raised up soon when Jesus comes, and they will be executed again. That is the greatest danger man should know, that they are not fighting with man, they are fighting with their Creator. And this Creator is not a small Creator. He just speaks with the take of dust and he creates man. He speaks and he creates this universe. So we are talking about a mighty, powerful Creator. And any man goes against him has to pay a price also. So there Beaton was burning him, and he told him something. You see me today, I'm talking about, George Whitshire. He said, you see me today, Mr. Cardinal, but in a few months you won't be there. And in May 29, 1546, he also was destroyed. He was killed. And his prophecy became real. Now, why we talked about the middle churches, if you say there was no prophecy and nobody were, inspired, it's not true. They were middle time. We're talking about those Middle Ages. Now, let's go to the early church, because we will discuss more about the early church, and then we will come back to the last church. Let's go to the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 11, verse 28. And there stood up one of them named Agabus, and signified by the Spirit that there should be a great drought throughout all the world, which came to pass in the days of Claudius Caesar. So there was Agabus, who was a prophet, and he was prophesying what? He was prophesying that there will be a great drought in that country. So that prophecy, it didn't die out. It was there in the early church. And just the same chapter, if you go to chapter 21, Acts chapter 21. Acts chapter 21, verse 10. And he says, and as we tarried there many days, there came down from Judah a certain prophet named Agabus, And when he was come unto us, he took Paul's girdle and bound his own hands and feet and said, This says the Holy Spirit, So shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man that owneth this girdle, and shall deliver him unto the hands of the Gentiles. So it was prophesied concerning Paul by Agabus, the same person who predicted the drought. Now he's saying, now Paul is going to be bound and he'll be taken like a prisoner. Did it happen? Exactly like he foretold, it came to pass. So it was not something. This he did 19 years later when he predicted the drought. He predicted the imprisonment of Paul also. Now, if we go to, again, Acts chapter 13, 1 and 2, it says, Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simon, that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. So we know that they were called prophets because they were also predicting the future. And you know Barnabas is very famous, and then we know the rest of them. We don't have much information concerning what they were writing, but there was some 4 prophets were mentioned there. Okay, so there we know there were not 1 prophet, but there were 4 prophets. So it's something to consider. Then it talks about Philippi, that when he went, there was residing in Philippi, Caesarea, Philip, who was residing in Caesarea, and he had 4 daughters that were prophets. This Philip was one of the 7 deacons, and he was residing in Caesarea, and he was ordained, and his daughters were also prophets, because I believe that whoever has close relationship with God, his children become closer to God also. So you saw some of the prophets which are mentioned and their predictions in the early church. Now let's go, you saw the middle church we were discussing. Now let's go to the last church. So last church you won't have it in the Bible, but you have it in the history. There was one man called William Foy. William Foy was a black man, and he was like, escaped from the slavery, but he was born in Boston, Massachusetts. He was residing 2 different times. In 1842, he saw visions. And January 18 and February 4, these are documented things that we have proof. The other thing is, a few years ago, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when we had the Sabbath school, they were discussing about these prophets who were, telling, and what happened to them. Okay, so it's proof. But if you want, there is so much evidence. You can even maybe type their names in the YouTube. Maybe you might find something about them. 2 different times, okay? Invitation went from city to city and tell the wonderful things he had seen. So large halls were reserved, and he related to the people, okay? And thousands gathered behind him. And he spoke to them about the heavenly world. Like Paul was invited to see the visions of the heavenly world. And he relayed those things, what he saw. And here also, he was revealing what God relayed to him. And he saw the beauty of the New Jerusalem and the angels. And when closer to 1844, the 2300 day prophecy, he was revealed 3 platforms. Okay, and he saw in the very first platforms people were getting inside and it was going upward, and then some of them were giving away, and then the angel said they were apostatized, and that's why they went away. Then that one went and merged with the second platform, and then it was going further higher, and the third platform went and merged close to the heavenly city. But later on, in 1845, he died though. He didn't live long, because I think God, because he had so much resistance with the public. He was a very nice gentleman, and he was also, very respected. But still there was a lot of protest because he was a black man. That time, they really, have so much prejudice over these things. And it hurts. Even God selects. Maybe God, didn't allow him. Maybe he put him to sleep because of that. But still, can you see the choice of God when he makes? He doesn't have no distinction with color. He doesn't have no distinction with people. He chooses whoever is willing to serve him. So he was called. But interesting enough, when he was relating about these visions, he related to public. Eventually, 1845, Sister White was talking about this platform, and she was explaining about what this platform means. She was saying it's first angel's message, second angel's message, third angel's message. Okay, but she was not the first one to get this. This brother William Foy already had it. Now then it was given to another person, okay, prophecy of a young man from Portland, Maine, by the name of Hazen Foss. He was a great man, well educated, well respected, great person. He was, when the close of 1844 came, 6 weeks before, he was revealed about these 3 platforms in vision. And God explained to him what it means and made him to go and relate this vision. And what did he do? He was told there will be resistance too. He went, he saw this vision, and he was praying to God. He doesn't want to go. Second time God revealed this thing and said, please go and relate to these people. You see, we sometimes say that why God didn't bring the message, why these people were waiting for the message. The answer is because of the reluctance of the people. God chooses somebody and says, go and tell this to this guy, and they don't want to say, oh, I don't want to go. So what can God do? He waits. And then the third time, when the vision was given, a short vision was given, in that he said, you are being taken away, and I have chosen the weakest of the weakest to relate this message to the world. So that was a very interesting thing. And because he chose the weakest of the weakest. And what happened is, then when, the thing I forgot to let you know. The third time when he was told that, he got scared. So he went and reserved a big meeting place in McGill Hill, Portland, Maine, and to relate his vision. So there was a public 500 to 1,000 gathered, and he stood up and he started to talk. And his vision went away. He was thinking, and he said, you know what he said? I'm a lost man. The vision is taken away from me. So that was a sad thing that happened to him, because without he willing to relate this, the vision was taken away. So there is some time, like Balaam and these fellows, we have to be careful with God's work, because it will be taken out if we won't live up to the message what is given to us. Okay, so what happens is, 2 months afterwards, in January 1st, 1845, Ellen G. White was preaching, talking about this. Like I said, remember I was telling you just before that other fellow also found. And he was just staying in the adjoining place, and he heard her preach about this. So he came running and he listened. And he said, yes, this is the one that it was given to me. This is what she's saying to you all. So it was not a chance that Sister White was chosen. It was already foretold. And interesting enough, these documents were documented. Okay, so you could, it's a proof that, it's not like a we are talking about a story or some kind of a deception, no. So she was 17 years old, okay, when she was chosen. When she was 9 years old, there was a friend of hers took a stone and struck her like that. And it fell on her nose and broke her nose and broke internally too, or damaged the brain, her lungs and everything. Everybody gave up on her. Even the medical doctors said, she's finished. The half lung was completely paralyzed. Her body was completely given up, like given up person. But when God showed her, he said, now you go and relate what I'm relating to you. But you will see a great difference between your life. Everybody thought that she will die when she was 10 years old. But she lived to 78 years old. She lived and she went through so much of traveling, and she brought the message to so many people. Amen. Yeah. Now, we will go and see whether she really sent of God. We believe she was sent of God because of the third angel's message. What did you see in the third angel's message? You saw the 10 commandments and you saw the spirit of prophecy. So Jesus went into the most holy and he sent his messenger, because the people of God started to focus on the cleansing of the sanctuary. They were studying, they were praying, and then the Spirit of God was activated. Although she was not the choice of God, okay, but she was the one who fulfilled his mission, that we can say. Now, we will see the counterfeit and the false prophets, because that's what we have to investigate. Now, she saw many open visions. Okay, because you saw, we were talking about last time, night vision and open vision. Many of them were open vision. Eyewitness to her visions, even this Luthbaro was writing about that 50 times he saw her from 1858 onwards, because he was a young pastor. As the Spirit came upon her, she would give 3 shouts. She will say, glory, glory, glory. But when I'm saying glory, 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 how do you hear? That you're hearing it from here, no? When I'm saying here, glory, 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 if I say glory, 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 you are hearing it from here. But interesting, all this time, all these people who witnessed, they heard when she said glory, it was like coming from above, zoom like that. And the second one was a little bit faintish, and the third one was like they are hearing it from far away. So that itself, it's a very interesting thing to note. Okay? And she always, after the 3 times when she says glory, for half a minute or something like that, she loses her strength and she falls to the ground. She doesn't fall, she goes down like that. Then they were saying that it's interesting, somebody must be holding, because you will fall like that if you lose conscience or go like that. Gently she is going down. It's like a miracle that when she goes down, so she goes flat on the floor. Then afterwards, because many doctors, not many, I think around 5 or 6 doctors challenged her visions. They said she's a false prophet, it's all mesmerism and all kinds of things. Let's prove that all things she says, is it true? But some of these doctors went and checked her blood pressure and pulse. They were all normal. But there was no breathing. Sometimes he went into 5 hours, 6 hours in vision. There was no breathing. And her face stayed perfect color. It didn't go pale or she was lacking oxygen, she died. No. So that itself shows there was a supernatural power was given to her to sustain her in these things. Then sometimes people came, took a candle and lighted and brought it closer to her eyes so that she will close. Because she didn't close her eyes. Her eyes was like, we will see that what is written in the Bible concerning that. She was like watching something far away. Her eyelids never blink. It stays open like she's seeing something far away. But some of them light up a candle and brought closer to her eyes, very close even. She didn't blink. She didn't even know that they were doing that. The other thing is, when she talks, when she, comes and when she talks, her hands and things, sometimes she wakes up and stands up and starts talking about things. And she's so graceful. Sometimes these strong men try to pull her hand. They hang on her hand. They can't move her hand because it was supernaturally sustained. Even she was taking big Bible and she was relating and they were standing and watching what she was saying. So it's a supernatural thing that, that what God was using her to do. And, so we know that these things are documented. The other very interesting thing I read about, that one day that James White and Joseph Bates and all these people were going on a long journey. Always James White gets the untamed horses because it's cheap and so that he could use them for some purpose, because it's cheap. But he tried to tame them, but sometimes but one time there was considered one horse he is impossible to tame. So strong and so we can say wicked horse can be called, something like that. He will break because he has killed 2 people. But still James White went and purchased, and then all these brothers were going on a long journey. Bates was there. Bates is a very... and what happened is, inside when they were starting the journey, Sister White saw a vision. And God was revealing something. She get down and she was standing in front of the horse and then she got down. She went a little bit distant. She came back, climbed them, just started. And the horse didn't do nothing. He didn't pull up or do nothing. He was like a tamed horse or something like that, in a movement. So it happens with God that He can do anything if we are true to God. Now let's go to 2 Peter. Chapter 1, verse 21. He says, "For the prophecy come not in old time by the will of men, but the holy men of God spoke as they were moved by the Holy Ghost." So there is something that it's relating to us. Prophecy didn't come because man's fancy stories or something. No. The Spirit of God was moving upon them. That's why they were revealing these secrets to us. The other thing is, when Sister White was having visions and when they were really doing, you feel the Spirit inside. So much of pleasant feeling you feel. You feel like as if you're standing in heaven or something like that. Those many who were with her when she received this, they were eyewitness for these things. Because remember, we are writing about the things people were eyewitness. You are eyewitness now what I'm talking to you. So this is what we are saying. We are not coming and telling you a story or a thing, but it is the Spirit of God working in our soul. Now, we'll go to Balaam, what he wrote about that. Let's go to Numbers, chapter 24. Verse 3 and 4. And he took up his parable and said, Balaam, the son of Beor, had said, and the man whose eyes are open had said, he had said, which heard the words of God, which saw the visions of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. So, what is he saying? When you have an open vision, your eyes are open, it's not blinking, and you're going like into a trance, like you're seeing something far away, an object or something. So that's what Balaam was. Balaam was a true prophet of God for some time. So at least he wrote about this, about the visions, about that. And if we go to Daniel, and then we will finish it. Daniel chapter 10, verse 8. Okay, it says, therefore I was left alone and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me, for my comeliness was turned into corruption, and I retained no strength. Ellen G. White, she was losing her strength, and that is why she was falling like down, not falling, the angel was letting her down. And yet I have the voice of his words, and I heard the voice of his words. Then I was in deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. And then someone touched him and strengthened him. So it's important that God strengthen us, because he says, all the strength is taken away from me. And supernatural strength, the Spirit of God is imparted to me to have this communication with the throne of God. So it's not like we are talking some stories here. We are talking about the conversation. This is happening with the throne and Jesus and the Spirit of God. You know, if any man in these moments try to play with those prophets and things, they are cut out right on the spot. Now, I finish with this and I say a few things and I will close the sermon. We have to understand the story behind these things. We know the first angel, second angel, third angel, and we know we are part of that message, first angel, second angel, third angel. Then she says there will be another movement, Revelation 18th angel, and that is what we were talking about today. We are part of that Revelation 18th angel. Although the Seventh-day Adventist Church was true to God, they did many great work and things, but they didn't accomplish everything that God asked them to do. They started to openly violate the 10 Commandments, going into war. That is not, thou shalt not kill. And the other part is, I also want to talk to you about vegetarianism. Vegetarianism is an important request by God to distinguish his last church. Sister White said, those who will be eating meat, a morsel of meat, won't stand in the people of God in the last days of this earth movement. Why she mentioned, and then she was also talking about when shall this Reformation transpire or come into existence. Not on the First World War, but on the Second World War. She was mentioning, and we came in the First World War, we came into existence, in the First World War. She was mentioning in the First World War that we will be coming into existence. Because in the Second World War, she doesn't say that. She says the other nations will be joining inside. It is true. The First World War, they didn't have all the nations that were participating in the Second World War. Second World War, more nations were involved. And the other thing is, in the First World War, when she was saying that God's people got together and the Spirit of God started to move inside them, and they started to create a reformation and a reorganization. And there we are standing. Now, if you apply all the prophecies, like I said, It has to show something to us whether we are true or false. The very first thing, like I mentioned, way that you will distinguish whether you are true or false is through the 10 Commandments. There is no other way that we could distinguish and say, this guy is the Church of God and this guy is the false Christ. Because God gave us this message. Because I was talking to this brother this morning, there is around 225 Reformation churches exist. I was surprised when I read that. That was documented in the Bible commentaries of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because there was like 15 volumes they published, and in that they wrote. And then we had this pastor from Anglican. He died in a motorcycle accident because he was trying to unite the churches together with the papacy. He was also saying that before Luther there were only 2 churches existed, but after him 2,300 churches exist. Now is a problem. Everybody inside the Adventist church is breaking away and starting their own reformation. That is also confusion. But interesting enough, she writes in she writes in Acts of the Apostles, very clear thing. God doesn't call people here one, here there. He has a people united as one body, and they are all standing on one platform. That is the commandments of God and the spirit of prophecy. So be careful, don't get confused and run away, because it will be your soul which will be lost if you get confused. Because spirit of prophecy is not just a story, it is a serious thing that God has given us, that especially in these last days, so much Satan is working. Do you think these people are blinded? They have so much knowledge they have. I was surprised. I saw double doctorate from Seventh-day Adventist Church. He was a pastor. He became very friendly with me. And he said to me, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, most of the pastors, we don't believe in Ellen G. White's writing. But like I said, if you don't believe in Ellen G. White's writing, then why are you preaching the third angel's message? And this is where the trouble is, because the enemy knows that we have short time, and this is the time that we all get together and prepare our souls and stand before the great throne and receive the seal of God. So if you receive the seal of God, what will happen to you? You will receive the latter rain. If you receive the latter rain, what will happen to you? You are able to go through the 7 plagues, because you won't be able otherwise. You will be consumed before, because it is a dead time. And we preach before these events happen, as a forewarning to this world, as a forewarning to our members, forewarning to every living into things. The time is at hand, and it is the end of all things. Amen. Amen. So